We've just entered into April, which means, of course, that we've just started a new quarter. And in keeping with its now traditional practice of releasing estimated quarterly figures a few days after the previous quarter has ended, Tesla has just released its estimated production and delivery figures for Q1 2019. While these figures are provisional, official figures won't be released until Tesla publishes its quarterly earnings a little later this month or early next. These production and delivery estimates have generally been pretty accurate, and they help us in the media, not to mention Tesla fans and those on Wall Street, figure out just how the company is doing. For the past few years, Tesla has enjoyed a quarter-on-quarter increase in both production and delivery figures, something that helped it turn a profit in the third and fourth quarters of last year. But as these just released figures detail, Tesla produced 9,455 less cars than it did in Q4 in Q1, and it delivered nearly 28,000 cars less last quarter than it did at the end of last year. That's a 31% drop in deliveries quarter to quarter. At the same time, however, Tesla's European sales successes with Model 3, deliveries for which started in Europe and China at the start of this year and are now in full swing, has meant that Model 3 has managed to not only outsell every other electric car in Europe during the first quarter of this year, but also every other mid-size premium car too. That little bit of information, which Tesla says translates to it selling 60% more Tesla Model 3s than nearest competitor of any fuel type, is certainly worth celebrating. However, those dropped production and delivery figures are sounding the alarm bells for some in the auto industry. Some are asking questions about how Tesla would have done last quarter without the mad dash it engaged in for the last 10 days or so of March to get as many cars in customers' hands as possible. Some want to know why the large drop in deliveries occurred. Some are wondering what the real demand for Tesla's electric cars are. And yet again, the battle lines are drawn between those who fear the world is out to get Tesla and those who hope the quarterly figures are a chance to make a quick buck. This means that in the next couple of days, you're going to see a slew of different arguments and conjectures focused exclusively on these quarterly estimates. Some will portray Tesla in a positive light, others will do so in a negative light. So, as usual, I'm going to try and avoid both sides in the search of a little context, namely why these estimates show a slowdown in production and deliveries, and what we need to remember about the auto industry as a whole, and what it really could mean for Tesla long term. I'm going to start with deliveries, if that's okay. Before I do, I should throw in here the fact that all vehicle sales, regardless of the automaker, do tend to be slower in the first quarter of any year due to northern winter weather, recovery from the holidays, and of course, impending tax seasons. And they all have an impact. So too in the US did the federal tax credit rebate program for plug-in cars. Tesla customers saw their total allowable federal tax credit for Tesla purchases halved at the end of 2018, meaning delivery figures were bound to be bumped upwards at the end of last year as people tried to max out their tax credits before the year ended. Unlike Q4 last year, when Tesla was exclusively focused on delivering cars to North American customers for the aforementioned tax breaks, Q1 represented a major shift in Tesla's focus to overseas markets. And that did a couple of things. First, it increases the time between vehicle production and delivery, because every new Tesla is still being made in Fremont, California, regardless of where it ends up in the world. And second, it meant that even after you take into consideration the physical time it takes to ship a car halfway around the world, there are extra steps that have to be taken in order to get the car off the ship and into the hands of the owner, steps that Tesla currently doesn't really control. In North America, Tesla is now getting to a point where it's controlling pretty much the entire process from factory to customer, including shipping of cars. When you have customs and freight haulage firms and docking fees to pay for, that slows things up. And it did in Q1. In Europe, for example, Tesla suffered some early teething problems as a result of widespread industrial action at various ports that were nothing to do with the company. In China, it suffered delays caused by what amounted to bureaucratic red tape and, said China at the time, incorrectly labelled vehicle components. At the end of this last quarter, Tesla estimated it had over 10,600 cars in transit. That's cars which had left its facilities but which hadn't yet been delivered to customers. That's a pretty high figure and does account for some of the nearly 28,000 drop in delivered cars for the quarter. But there's still the drop in production to account for. And here's where it gets interesting, at least I think so. You see, Tesla actually made more Tesla Model 3s during the first quarter of this year than it did in the last quarter of 2018. Admittedly, the increase in production was small, up to an estimated 62,950 cars from 61,394, but it was there. The real change when it comes to production, however, comes from the drop in Model S and Model X, whose cumulative production figures dropped from 25,100 and some to 14,150. Why? Well, there are all sorts of potential reasons, but if I had to guess, I think there are two big causes. First, Model S and Model X went through some significant changes in pricing and trim during Q1. For example, they both lost their entry-level model variants, and they did increase their price a few times. Second, I'm assuming the upsell that Tesla was doing with Model S, as in, hey customer, don't wait for your Model 3, buy a Model S instead, is no longer happening, at least as much as it once was. In short, Model S and Model X are being eclipsed by their newer, trendier, more affordable sibling. This was evidenced towards the end of the quarter when Tesla began to offer perks to existing Model S and Model X owners with free supercharging on their cars in order to encourage them to trade in their older car and get a newer model with free supercharging grandfathered in on the new car. I should add too that Tesla's Model S and Model X don't have the same earning potential for Tesla as Model 3. Sure, they can be high-ticket cars, but if Tesla wants to make the transition to a mainstream brand, which I think it is and can, it needs to focus on the car that makes it the most money and can be made in the highest volume. Right now, that's Model 3, and as Elon Musk has noted, that will likely switch to Model Y when Tesla brings that car to market in a year or so. My final thought to production slowing relates to the changes that come when a model is built for a new market. There will be subtle differences on the production line between North American, European, and Chinese cars. That increases complexity in the manufacturing process and will, at least for now, slow things down. I could also suggest Tesla's end of 2018 production speed wasn't entirely sustainable given Tesla's production limitations. But I don't think that would have been playing a huge part in slowing down the production line now. Is demand for Tesla slowing down? Well, in the US, probably, since most people who wanted a Tesla Model 3 that wasn't the Model 3 standard range now have their cars. But in other markets, not yet. Globally, Model S and X demand seems to be dropping. That seems less of a symptom of a lack of interest in the cars, but rather the loss of sales to Model 3 instead. It's also worth remembering that demand for older models does drop with time. Look at any car and you'll see its most popular years of production are usually between 2 and 4 years into that production run, with a drop off towards the end of its life. Model S, we should remember, is now 7 years old, and I think a refresh is well overdue. Should we worry about production and deliveries? Not yet. If it continues for several consecutive quarters, especially when other rivals come to market, then yes, that would be a very different matter. And then we should worry. That's it. Thanks for watching. Let us know if you liked it or didn't like it below. Scribble a comment, hit the notification bell so you don't miss out on a single episode. And if you'd like to support the network, there are 3 ways you can do that just below me in the show notes. Don't forget that we have also just launched some great new t-shirts in our store. These include our April Fool's Day Tesla Evolved shirt, as well as our brand new Evolved plug shirts that we're setting together for Fully Charged Live. Buy one, support the show, and help us continue to make great content. I'll be back soon with another episode, but until that point, keep evolving.